Hello everyone, my name is Thomas and today I'll be talking to you about the issues surrounding our increasing prison population, its effects on current rehabilitation practices, and facility considerations with respect to prison environments and recidivism prevention. Addressment of these issues will allow us to formulate a strategic plan for the coming years and may aid in the fulfilment of managing risk, building a sustainable prison system, and reducing reoffending. I'll try to keep this brief, as everything I discuss today will be provided in the soon-to-be-published report. So with all the introductions out of the way, let's begin. Considering the official statistics that have been available since the 30th of June 2018, we have seen an increase of 81.5% in prison numbers over the past 10 years. This amounts to over 7,666 current prisoners. Consequently, the incarceration rate has risen over the past 10 years as well, from 80 per 100,000 of the state's population in 2008 to the current 152 per 100,000. Whilst we, along with the ACT and Tasmania, have the lowest incarceration rates in Australia, this should not detract from the fact that the number continues to rise and must be addressed. There are numerous reasons as to why prison numbers have increased. What I would like you to keep in the back of your mind is, much of it is external to our industry. As stressed by the Victorian Ombudsman in his report on prisoner rehabilitation and reintegration, prisons and correction systems make up only one part of the broader criminal justice continuum. What we do and what we provide is influenced largely by the political spectrum. We are not at liberty to change the decision of a judge. We cannot breach our responsibilities pertaining to parole and community corrections. We do not control the increases in police presence and arrest rates, and how we address social conditions such as housing, health, education and employment is limited to the sentenced individuals that pass through our organisation. The current approach taken by policymakers has thus had a drastic effect on prison numbers as a result of their tough on crime approach following high profile crimes that instigated a level of fear within the community, which consequently translated into backlash against the criminal justice system. This has resulted in reforms amounting to less bail being granted, resulting in remand rates that account for, I think, 38% of all prisoners in the system, tougher parole, abolishment of suspended sentences which are still used in other states, elimination of home detention, and increased imprisonment terms. The result? An influx of individuals being pushed through our doors. The increase in prisoners has consequently influenced much of the government's expenditure. As expressed by Professor David Hayward, spending on corrections is now outstripping that for most of other areas of government, including schools, hospitals, and even social housing. The recent budget announcement of more than $1.8 billion to increase prison capacity across the state is the result of all this, and it's a decision that has understandably been subject to criticism by many commentators. It is therefore paramount that we identify how best to use the funding to produce facilities that reinforce positive cultures and reduce reoffending, with academic studies revealing that prison as a punishment alone just simply isn't enough to deter reoffending. This is an issue that is very much a concern for us, given that 43.7% of those released between the years of 2015 and 2016 had returned to our facilities, with over 50% who are currently serving in prison having previously been convicted. Quite simply, if deterrence through punishment worked, we wouldn't have anyone in prisons. Consequently, prison, if not properly implemented, becomes counterintuitive to the safety of the community. Even though these individuals are kept out of the public for a time, the reality is most return to society, and if rehabilitation efforts are poor, or they have been negatively conditioned by criminogenic tendencies that are often existent in traditional prison systems, their likelihood of reoffending still exists. If we compare this to our community corrections statistics, of which deals with more individuals at 13,000 plus, outside the confinements of an institution and only having a return rate of 13.9% over the 2 years, it's clear that a focus needs to be placed on prisoners of whom are more at risk of reoffending. This consequently supports the use of the risk assessment design for providing increased rehabilitation programs to individuals more likely to reoffend based on a variety of factors. Furthermore, it is believed that the programs have a greater impact on high-risk individuals and may have the opposite effect on low-risk prisoners. It is our responsibility to not only fulfill the state's intentions of keeping these individuals out of the community for their sentences, but to prepare them for reintegration back into society. Thankfully, there is quite a bit of research available to us to aid in providing this to the best possible standard. As an organisation, we have done well to establish numerous services to aid in the rehabilitation of offenders pre and post release. Research behind the use of programs that include a cognitive component to address attitudes and values and beliefs that support antisocial behaviour have been relatively positive from the wider academic community. However, it has been noted by Brown and Johns of the University of Melbourne that these learnt skills may be difficult to implement in day-to-day challenges outside of prison if support is not adequately provided. Thus, it is paramount that we find ways to channel our long-term spending into post-release resources in order to maintain the pre-release efforts. The use of vocational educational training supplied by local TAFE providers and the provision of employment opportunities is also well received, with studies showing that this increases prisoner morale and positively reinforces attitudes. Many prisoners have since provided anecdotal evidence of their successes resulting from such programs. Furthermore, the use of programs specific to certain offences, such as drug treatment and family violence matters, are also a step in the right direction. Despite our best efforts to facilitate some variation of the mentioned programs, however, Victoria's prison numbers have greatly impacted our ability to deliver, as stressed by the Ombudsman in his report. In short, the constant administration of individuals both held in remand or sentenced to imprisonment has resulted in an environment in constant flux. Prisoners are moved around constantly, and as a result, programs are often interrupted or simply not made readily available during their time of incarceration, attributing to waiting lists and limited capacities. Furthermore, prisoner reluctancy to participate also presents an issue for some. All these factors inhibit our ability to adequately provide rehabilitation in an environment where the obstacles simply outweigh the opportunities, which may ultimately lead to recidivism. Therefore, how prisoners are kept, how they are treated, and the social climate of the prison environment may ultimately play a greater role in reducing reoffences where an environment of continual expansion exists. As explored by Harding and other and other scholars, a prison's social climate greatly affects a person's chance at rehabilitation. Maximum security institutions often have greater criminogenic tendencies amounting from increased limitations on freedom and the stigma attached to the prison, whereas the lower security prisons are viewed as more positive. If we compare the recidivism rates of Victorian prisons with those with minimum security levels provide lower rates. These facilities are often coupled with an emphasis on rehabilitation or progressive prison layouts that are either open planned, such as Lang Kal Kal, or community orientated, much like Beechworth Correctional Centre. These layouts are extremely limited in our maximum and medium institutions, of which have seen higher rates of reoffending. So currently, the New South Wales is operating an open plan prison that was quickly built for maximum security inmates. So far, the Hunter Correction Facility has had no reports of assaults on staff, deaths, escape attempts, and there's only been one incident of self-harm. However, statistics regarding recidivism rates are not yet available. So if we intend to make use of the increased funds to increase prison capacity, it will be in the interests of both us policymakers and the community to consider layouts and environments that have been proven to work. So for prison systems to be effective, they must be constantly scrutinised and evaluated, as every system is different depending on the jurisdiction. There is a greater need to evaluate the social climate within each prison and their corresponding recidivism rates. So to conclude, we may be able to address the increasing prison population and reoffending rates by facilitating discussion across government departments based on the information available to us regarding increased use of imprisonment and its causes as a means of identifying areas of improvement, ensuring adequate support programs pre and post-release to those deemed most at risk, expanding existing programs that have been deemed beneficial to prisoners to improve both rehabilitation chances and prison climates, and conducting evaluations as to the effectiveness of prison layout and their effectiveness regarding reoffending and program acceptance. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. I've stuck to the 10 minutes, hopefully, and hopefully it was insightful. Cheers.